always starts the same way, with silence. Thick, unnatural silence, like the world's holding its breath, waiting for something awful to happen. In District 9, silence wasn't rare, but it usually meant the screams had already stopped. Detective Julian Mercer stood outside a modest apartment building on Grant Avenue. Rain gathered in his collar. He barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the open door ahead, a yellow tape fluttering in the wind, the kind that warns people to stay out and haunts those who go in. 3 murders in 6 days, 3 clean apartments, 3 silent nights, all with one unshakable signature. A red hourglass carved into the chest, precise, deliberate, like a countdown no one could stop. The press had dubbed the killer the Sandman, a poetic name for a brutal ritual. But Julian hated that name, because the Sandman didn't bring dreams. He brought unmaking. He made the world quieter and colder, one body at a time. The latest victim was Clarissa Dent, age 29, elementary school teacher. No criminal history, no known enemies. Found by a neighbor who noticed her lights were still on at dawn. Inside, the air was still, too still. A scented candle flickered weakly beside her bed. A teacup sat half full on the desk, and Clarissa lay there, as if nothing had ever happened, except for the hourglass, red, deep, cut with intention, like it meant something, not just to the killer, but to him. Julian felt it again, that strange throb in his chest, a sharp chill up his spine, a feeling he couldn't quite explain, but had grown to dread. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. He'd seen this before, not in other victims, but somewhere darker, somewhere personal. That night, he didn't sleep, again. Sleep had become a luxury, one he no longer trusted. When he closed his eyes, he didn't rest. He traveled to places his waking mind refused to acknowledge. Dark staircases, flickering lights, blood-slicked tile, a knife he didn't remember holding, a scream, half familiar, a voice, not quite his own, and then silence. He would wake drenched in sweat, mouth dry, hands shaking, the taste of metal on his tongue. He told himself it was stress, that all good detectives eventually cracked. But that was the first lie, and he told it far too easily. The second came when he found the journal. It was around midnight. Julian had been rifling through old case files, trying to find some thread, any thread. That's when he opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years, and there it was, a small leather-bound notebook, unmarked, dusty. But when he opened it, his blood turned cold. Each page was filled with writing, his handwriting, but the words weren't his. Detailed accounts of the murders, dates, names, psychological notes on each victim, descriptions of how they were chosen and why. Clarissa's name appeared 2 days before she was killed. He flipped back. The previous victims were there too, with eerie accuracy. Even information he didn't know had been made public. He read every word, twice, then a third time, hoping something would click, that maybe he had written it in a trance as part of some deep investigation technique he'd forgotten. But the truth was simpler and more terrifying. This was a confession, written in his own hand, from a version of himself he didn't know existed. The third lie came when he called no one, filed no report, logged no evidence. He told himself he needed more proof, that he owed it to the victims to keep going. But the truth, he was afraid of what he'd find, afraid that the killer he'd been chasing wasn't a stranger, wasn't a mystery, wasn't even a he. It was him, or part of him. There's a moment between sleep and waking, a fragile window where the body is still, but the mind fractures. He'd read about it once in a case file. Victims of trauma, people who split, not just emotionally, but entirely. He never believed in that sort of thing, until now. He called it the bleeding hour, the stretch of time where his skin still fit, but his thoughts were no longer his own, where something beneath the surface took control and moved through the world like a shadow with his face. Julian Mercer had hunted killers his whole life. He never thought he'd find one inside himself. But the truth was no longer something he could ignore. Not after what he saw in that final journal entry. A name, a location, a time, tonight, 2 a.m. And the next victim was someone he knew.